Okay, now the third part I want to talk to you guys about is the shutter speed. Now, what this is think about it as the amount of blur that you're going to get in your image. This is going to determine the amount of blur that you're going to get in your image, and it's going to kind of make it so the picture looks good for the individual who's watching your image. So to begin, we want to start with what are you looking for to get, right? There's two different types. There's two major types of videography that you want to think about. Do you want a video look or do you want a film look? These are the two different ways that I like to break it down. For a film look, you want to have a frame rate of 24 frames per second. And what does that mean? That just means, like, think about with photography. The best way I can think about it is think about taking 24 pictures every single second, and that's how the video will come out, right? 24 frames. If you're doing it for video, as far as like television or commercial work, typically what you want is 30 frames per second. And what that would look like is taking 30 pictures every second, and that would be your image. So these are the two different ways that you want to think about it. In regards to the shutter speed, as this would work, you want to double whatever your frame rate is, right? So what does that mean? Well, let's say, for example, that I'm shooting for a film look, right? Which means that I'm shooting at 24 frames per second. I want to double that for my shutter speed, which would be what? If you said 1/48th of a second, you're absolutely right. So what that would look like is 24 frames a second and 1/48th a second in the speed of your shutter, right? So if I was doing a video look, which is 30 frames per second, I would want to double that on my camera. And this is what you can find this on your camera. If you look for the shutter speed, think about it as your when you're taking photos, for example, you'll see, like, the shutter speed is 1/100th of a second, or 1/50th of a second, or a 1/20th of a second, right? These numbers, that's the number that you're going to be using to get the right frame rate for your video, or right shutter for your video. So if your video says, if you're shooting at 24 frames a second or 30 frames a second, just remember that you want to double the shutter speed on the camera. And what I want to do is show you guys some examples of what that will look like when you double the frame rate, and how it's going to change the way the image looks based on the way that you choose your shutter speed. So to get more advanced, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, and I'll show you guys some examples, you don't have to always use this rule. This is just kind of like the basic rule to kind of keep it within the realm of beginner to intermediate level videography. But as you get more advanced, you're going to be able to manipulate this to create different types of scenarios that are going to create a different feeling and mood for the viewer. And that's more advanced stuff that we're going to talk about later on. But pretty much what I want you guys to get is understand that the frame rate and the shutter speed are 2 in 1, right? Whatever your frame rate is that you choose, you want to make sure that you're doubling your shutter speed. And we're going to go into all these three things right now. So now we have the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed. We got the basis of those three things. And I understand it might be still a little bit confusing for you, but as you kind of understand the basis of those three things, what we're going to do is we're going to put all three of those things into effect so you can kind of see how these things work together to create an image.